Hey guys, how you doing? Here for video three, panning slash subgroups. Now, the reason why we bundle these two together is because the functionality for panning has been sort of fused with the functionality for subgroups. So you'll find that some of the things that you'd use your panning knobs for are actually used for to manipulate your subgroups, and vice versa. So what we're going to do is, in the previous videos, we talked about setting up. Actually, you know what? I haven't even. Hang on, give me 2 seconds. There we go. So in the previous, that's much better. Hi guys, now you can see me. So in the previous videos, we talked about setting up a microphone, and we're going to use the same microphone that we set up in the previous video for the panning experience. Now, some mixers won't have the ability to pan. Some mixers won't have subgroups. If your mixer doesn't have the ability to pan, I don't think you've bought the right type of mixer. Actually, it's not a case of I don't think. It's not the correct mixer. You've probably bought a mixer that's probably best suited for things like vlogging, you know, I think radio stations. If you're using something for live sound, panning is an essential feature. And as mentioned in previous videos, it adds clarity. It adds a lot of it adds a sort of 3D, 2D dimension to your mix. So panning is quite important. It's something that you definitely need in your mix. Subgroups are really, really, really helpful, and we'll go through some of the uses in this video. If you think that some of the areas that you're struggling with within your church will be down to the fact that you might need subgroups, then maybe it's time to start thinking about upgrading your mixer. There are a wide variety of mixers that offer subgroups. Don't just go crazy and say, look, I want to find the mixer with the most subgroups. You can do a lot with less. And one of the purposes of this video is to show you that you can do a lot with less. Initially, I thought I needed to go out and buy a very expensive mixer, and I was at the brink of spending £600 to £800 on a mixer just because it had 8 subgroups. When I found out that I could actually do the same thing using a mixer that had 4 subgroups. So before you go out and just irrationally just spend a whole bunch of money thinking that this is the way to go, have a listen to this video and make a decision after after you've heard what we have to say. For the purpose, I'm going to switch back to this microphone. I highly recommend this microphone. And I didn't say this in any of the previous videos, but I said this microphone has been likened. This is one of the Superlux Eco 88 mics, and it's been likened by other people. I haven't said this myself, but I've had some very reputable people say this microphone is similar to the function of a SM58. As I said, it's a very strong microphone, very sturdy. Now, an SM58 secondhand or brand new, I think it'll cost you about £98, £100, and so forth. It's retained its value. Now you might be able to find them elsewhere cheaper. If you find a cheaper SM58, bear in mind there are a lot of companies that have made copies and they call them SM58. It may not have the word Shure on them, they'll just be called SM58. I don't think Shure have I don't think they've got a patent on the term SM58. So be very careful. Make sure if you are going to go out and buy an SM58, make sure it's an original Shure SM58. There are many, many people who've made clones. I went on Facebook Marketplace just the other day, and someone was selling an SM58, but they were kind enough to actually put in the description that this is a copy, and they will look just the same. And people will sell those for £60, £50, and so on and so forth. You can pick up a box of 6 of these for 40 quid or under 40 pounds, meaning the retail value of one is about 8 quid. I don't think you can buy one on its own. I think you have to buy them as a set of 6, but for 40 pounds for 6 microphones. And they'll come in a box, they'll come in a cool case, but the case also has the microphone holder. So you know the device that you clip on. I don't have one on me now. You clip it on here, and then the holder goes into the mic stand. So there's a proprietary holder that will come for this mic. It's a very good sturdy holder. I like the way it works actually. It's unlike the other ones that just clasp it and you have to try and it kind of hugs it. I can't explain it, but it comes with everything in there. And for about 7 or 8 quid a piece, 7 or 8 British pounds per mic, you cannot go wrong with these. And as I mentioned before, previous churches that I've bought these for, I've bought a box of 6, donated it to one church, bought another box of 6, donated it to the other, only to find that church going back years later. I went back to one church. We bought these in 2008 or 2009, and they had bought other microphones, which were Shure microphones from a very reputable dealer in the UK. And the other microphones, the PG 48s and 68s, dead. They're long gone. These, they're still around to this day, and they still use these microphones. So I've dumped these in many places because they're so cheap. You know, someone will come and say, I need help with my microphones, I need help with this, and I'll get there and I'll see there's 6 different brands of microphones on the stage, and I'll just sort of say to them, look, I tend to use these for myself. I've got a box of 6. Why don't you just have them? And I'll just donate them. And I'll just go and buy another box of 6. And like I said, they're 40 quid. And I've done this twice thus far. I'm about to buy myself another box of 6. And I don't dump them because they're rubbish microphones. I give them to them because, one, they're so cheap. 2, I want to leave having done a setup knowing full well that they're set. And I don't charge for my services if it's for church. I don't think I've ever provided services outside of church, but I don't charge for my services if it's for church. But what you'll tend to find is churches will end up finding a way of putting money in my pocket. So when I've done something and I realize, you know what, they really need this, I will just bless them. But what you tend to find is before you leave, they'll turn around and say, no, we've got to give you something. And, you know, I'll buy some more gear. Next place I go, I'll say, well, I got these off the money that they donated to me, even though I reluctantly, I normally don't want to take it. But that's why you'll find that I'll so easily go to the next place and leave cables or DI boxes and just say, look, brand new, out of the box, here you go. Just keep it. It's yours. Because it's all about sowing into another ministry. I may not always have money on me to give, and that church is going to be collecting money to buy equipment after I've left, because I'll leave them with a list of things to buy. To make it that more easier for them, I'll just say, look, don't buy this, don't buy that. Just take the stuff we've used for your demo, and we'll, just buy the rest of the stuff. But anyway, as I said, this video is going to be for panning and for subgroups. I'm going to go straight into it. All right, let's transition over. This is going to be interesting. Oh yeah, sorry, disclaimer, guys. I'm still working on my setup, so at the minute I have to physically hold the microphone, and I also have to physically hold the second camera that I use for demonstration purposes. So I apologize in advance for the bad camera skills. I will get something set up where I've got a decent setup that'll allow me to do something a little bit better and a bit more clearer for you. So bear with me for now. All right. Okay, so um, I hope you can hear me. So, going back to our original channel, this is the mic we set up in one of the previous videos, and I'm now currently looking at the panning for this particular microphone for this particular channel. Now, as you can see at the minute, the panning is set to straight up the middle. So if you're listening to me from headphones, you can hear my voice both on the left and it's equally balanced with my voice on the right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pan this all the way to the left, and if you can see, there's an L and there's an R. May not be as clear as I would want it to be, but there is a left and right there. And I'm going to pan this all the way to the left now, and let's see what we get. So you should hear me all the way in your left ear. Um, First time I heard this, I twitched. I was like, "Whoa, sounds like he's standing next to me." But my ears are very sensitive. So yeah, you should see me on the hear me on the left. I can see visually on my screen. I have a stereo. Um, I've got a stereo. What is this called? A stereo meter, and I can see that only the left side is flashing when I speak. I'm gonna set this all the way to the middle again, and you should have me back in the middle. And just for demonstration purposes, we're gonna go all the way to the right. And then very quickly there, you can hear me in the right. I'm gonna put this back to center again. So now you know how panning works. Um, in the previous video, I gave a few examples of ways in which you can utilize panning to your advantage. Um, Now, I am going to show you, I'm going to go through those again in a little bit more detail, just to give you scenarios where you can utilize panning to your advantage. So as you can see here, I've got multiple channels on this particular mixing desk. This is a Behringer Xenix X 2222 USB, and the USB just means it's got a USB output as well. So you can send the sound signal from the main left and right out of the USB into a computer. This is how we're actually recording at the minute. So the microphone you were listening to earlier on is on channel 8, and the microphone you're currently listening to right now is on channel 1, and it's going out of the USB at the back of the mixer into my laptop for the recording. So these mixes are actually very clean, and Behringer has made a lot of strides of late to improve the quality. So basically, they already had these mixes in production, but they relaunched all their mixes, and they rebranded them with this Xenix logo. And they added a little bit, a few upgrades to these mixes. They're actually really good now. So previously you'd be scared to buy a Behringer because you're scared they would break. They're designed in Germany, but they're actually made in China. But Behringer's reputation has gotten better over the years. You can now sort of trust them as a brand that will produce quality, especially some of their later stuff. Um, I always buy a lot of my gear from an actual shop. I buy a lot of stuff from a place in Germany called Thomann. They have been absolutely brilliant. I started shopping with Thomann back in 2008, and all the way up until now, they have. I've never had anything break, even though quite a lot of the things I bought were Behringer in the initial stages, and even up till this day. The one time I did have something break down on me, they sent the details for me to post it back. They just asked me to print off a document. I handed that to the post office. The post office told me it's already been paid for. All you need to do is hand us the goods, which I did. Little did I know, the moment they realized that the stuff had been handed in at the post office here in the UK, and this is my local post office, which is situated in a small shop called Londis. They actually dispatched the replacement, so I actually got it within 2 days, and they paid for everything. I didn't pay for anything, and that's the one time I've had issues with them. I just sent them a quick message and they sorted it out straight away. So don't worry about the fact that they're based in Germany. As they are Germans, they're very, very efficient. Anyway, back to panning. So, as you can see, first of all, we've done a quick pan test, and you can see that we can pan to the left, we can pan to the right, and you will hear the voice in the left and in the right. Let's just say, for argument's sake, you had 5 singers on the stage. Okay? You had 2 singers standing on the left-hand side of the main singer, and you had 2 singers standing on the right-hand side of the main singer. If we allocated channel 1 to the lead singer, and this is the channel I'm currently speaking to you on, channel 2 and 3 were the individuals standing to the left, and channels 3 and 4, that's all 4 channels, with the 3 and 4 were the individuals standing to the right. Now, what you could do with your panning to add clarity is you could set your pannings to how these singers look visually on the stage. So I'm going to do that very quickly, and I'll show you what I mean. There we go. So as you can see, channel 1 there is dead center. Channel 2 is to the left. Channel 3 is to the left, but it's closer to the middle. Channel 4 is to the right, but it's closer to the middle. And channel 5 is all the way down, almost at the end, to the right. It means that visually, what the individuals are seeing in the congregation is exactly what they can see or what they're hearing through the main speakers. So that's one of the main ways in which you can utilize panning. And what you'll find is if you had them all straight and coming out, there is a certain, I don't want to call it feedback, but there's a certain sort of sound you'll hear which sounds like a little bit of a rumble when they all start to sing at the exact same time, and you can hear the voice. It's a very it's very unclear, but there's a bit of a rumble that comes out of the speakers, because what's happening is all 5 vocalists are fighting for that center channel, and all their voices are sharing the same EQ spectrum. They're sharing the same position, or the same frequency. Sorry, in the EQ spectrum. Now, we talked a little about EQ in the previous video. I will try and link that video somewhere in the description so that you can go back and listen to it. But essentially, what happens is you want to EQ an individual mic, but you'll find that singers, since the human voice sits between about 350 and 3,500, 350 being an individual with a very deep voice, and 3,500 being a very high-pitched voice. So someone who sings soprano and it's really, really high-pitched. These are the kinds of individuals that they can sing and they can break glass with their voices. But yeah, you don't want, if you've got all female, all male, all sharing the same sort of frequency range, you don't want a situation where they're all dead center. You want to pan their vocals. That way you get clarity. And it moves the position of the vocals in the speakers, which means that the speakers aren't trying to fight to try and pump everything out dead center. Because you'll have musicians, maybe you might have a keyboard, and he's playing in the same sort of frequency range. Keyboards tend to do that. Saxophonists and guitars are trying to share the same frequency range. With panning, it just allows you to separate these instruments. And what used to happen back when we didn't know about this is people would walk up to the mixing desk and they'd say, "Oh, we can't hear the guitarist." And naturally, if you're not a very good sound man, you'll try and turn the guitarist up, and then now all of a sudden they can't hear the vocalists, and you'll try and turn the vocals, up, and then someone will come and say, "Well, we can't hear the saxophone anymore." and you'll find that you'll end up doing the rounds where you're trying to appease these individuals, and these guys will come and bother you, and then you'll go back to the same individuals, and you just keep going round and round in circles. The best way to go about it would be to use panning. If you pan them, everyone will be able to hear everything clearly enough, even though some things are turned down slightly lower than others, because they're not just hearing it straight, they're now beginning to hear it at a left and right, uh, from the left and right perspective. So that's a really really good way to utilize your panning. Other ways in which you can utilize your panning is, say for example you had a drum kit mic'd up to this particular desk, and you've got your kick, your snare, and however many other items there. In order to separate all the sounds that are coming through, so for example the floor tom and the kick will tend to share frequency ranges that are similar, even though the kick is a bit deeper and lower, and the floor tom, depending on how it's tuned, but they're closer to each other. And you might find that the hi hat and the snare, sorry, the hi hat and the crashes, the 16-inch crash or the 14-inch crash, might share similar sort of ranges. Um, you want to sort of utilize your panning to be able to separate things. If you've got two overhead mics on your kit, mic'd up, you want to pan those all the way, one all the way left, one all the way right, so that in your mix, things don't sort of get muddied up and sit in with everything else. And then you can use EQ to separate those frequencies. So you've got, say, for example, your kick in the middle, which is where I like to put my kick, but you're using only the low frequencies of that kick. So even though it's coming in the middle, because you're only amplifying the low frequencies, the singer's voices can sit nicely on top of that, and they don't muddy each other up or share the same frequencies. But if you don't hit the low cut filter button, which we discussed in the previous video, which is that removes anything that's below 75 hertz on the singer's microphones. What you do is you end up having a situation where, even though the kick is trying to sit low in the mix, the singers are sharing the same frequency range, because of that reason. So yes, it is very, 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 very important that you utilize your panning as much as possible to help add clarity. So if you've got nice clear EQ, use your panning to add a bit more clarity, and you'll find that things will work a little bit better for you. It's all about doing small things correctly. Moving away from panning a little bit, we're going to go to subgroups. Now, on this mixer here, you will see that you've got a solo button, which is that. Sorry, which is that, and you've got a sub button, which is that. Now, what you'll find with the solo and the sub button. In fact, I think I'm going to switch to. Should I switch back? No, no, we'll keep this. So what you'll find with I'm going to switch microphones. But what you find with the sub button, I have sub group 1 and 2 here, as you can clearly see, and just above them, you'll find that I've depressed the buttons there for left for sub and right for subgroup 1, left and right for subgroup 2. Now what this will do is any channel, sorry, that I've depressed the sub button there, if you have subgroup 3 and 4, you'll have an additional button there that'll say subgroup 3 and 4. And if you've got 5 and 6, likewise. And notice that they put them in pairs. So you'll have 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, etc. And they'll pair them up. And there's a reason why they do this. But if I was to depress one of these sub buttons, what that does is it first sends the mix for the signal from that channel to the subgroup channel first, and then if you press left and right on that subgroup channel, it'll then send it from there to the left and right. You could send it to the subgroup channel, but if you don't depress the left and right, it means you now have a situation where you have to plug your speakers or whatever you're outputting from directly into the subgroup ports on the mixer. If you don't do that, your signal that's coming from your channels disappears, and it doesn't get output anywhere. If you press those down, it gets sent to the main left and right. And if that's where your speakers are plugged in, that's fine. So there will be places at the back of this mixer where you can actually plug your subgroup cables in, and that will allow you to send your subgroup that channel to a subgroup. Now, why would you want to send an individual channel to a subgroup and then output it from the subgroup without sending it to the main mix? Well, there's two reasons why you'd want to do that. Number one, if you have something on one of these channels that you don't want to send to the main mix, but you want it to come out of the subgroup, you could use the subgroup for additional speakers. So, for example, you want those particular sounds to go directly to the subgroup channels because the subgroup channels are what's being used for your recording, but you don't want to send that to your main mix. You can depress the sub buttons and don't depress and don't do left and right there. So leave. So Sarah depress. Let me do this for channel 2. Sub 1 is down, main is up, solo is up, and then I would come here and I would undo left and right there. Then what I would do is I would connect whatever I'm using for my recording cable to the sub. I don't have the sub on the front here, but it'll look something like that. It's at the back of the mixer, and I would connect that directly to that, and send my recording out to where it needs to go. Or I've got separate speakers going into the children's ministry room, for example, and we don't want noise, so we just want the microphones. Then we can send that out, and then we can situate some speakers in the children's ministry room so that they can hear the pastor's voice, and they don't have to be disturbed by, the instruments or anything else that's coming out. So I could do it that way. I could also use this as a studio mixer and send that subgroup channel to someone's headphones in the room where the musicians are, or where the singers are, and they can utilize the subgroup's channels there for listening to themselves. That's one way of doing it. The second way of utilizing the subgroup channels would be if, say, for example, I had sub speakers. So these are the speakers that produce the low frequency, and I wanted to utilize my subgroup channels for the low frequency instruments, so i.e. the bass guitar and the kick and maybe even the floor tom, and I want to send those to the sub speakers. I could connect a bass guitar and connect a kick. Channel 6 will be the bass, the kick, and channel 7 will be the bass guitar. Hit sub on both those channels, but don't hit main. And what will happen is if that's not depressed, it won't go to the main. And then I can connect my sub speakers to, I can connect those sub channels to speakers, the sub speakers, and only the kick and the bass will go to the sub speakers, even the floor tom if I wanted to, and I will take them out of the main mix, which means the small speakers have more clarity because they don't have anything pumping out low frequency. They've got less items coming through the main speakers. So you've only got singers and maybe a keyboard and a guitar, and you don't have to deal with bass guitars and kicks coming out of there as well. And it leaves for a nice, cleaner mix in those. So that's what you can use your sub channels for, your subgroup channels. Alternatively, What you can also utilize these subgroup channels for is for um, this is actually quite interesting. So this will be utilized for grouping individual items. Now, if you're like me and you only have subgroup 1 and 2, which is one set of subgroups because they come in stereo pairs, and you wanted to be able to group all the singers into one particular into that one subgroup 1 and 2, what you can do is you can hit subgroup next to each and every singer's mic. So you have 5 singers there, and all of them are on subgroup 1 and 2. And what will happen is, 4 singers there, because the main mic is not going to go into the subgroups. It'll stay straight into the main, and then all the backing vocals. Let's just say channel 4, which is slightly higher than the others, they've got a softer voice. Channel 3 has got a very strong voice, so I've lowered the volume there. Channel 2, it's nominal, and channel 5 is also nominal. But now if I wanted to control all those 4, so channel 2, 3, 4, and 5, without changing that setting of this person on channel 4 has got a higher voice, and this person on channel 3 has got a weaker voice, and the person on channel 3 has got a very strong voice. What I can do is I can link everyone into 2, 3, 4, and 5 into the subgroups 1 and 2, then send that to left and right, which means channel 2, 3, 4, and 5 must come to the subgroup 1 and 2 first. And if I keep the volume down, like that, you won't be able to hear channels 2, 3, 4, and 5. But if I increase the volume, then you'll be able to hear more of them. The more I turn them up, the louder they become. So I can increase everybody on channels 2, 3, 4, and 5 up and down, independent of the mix I've just set up here. Now you can do that with drum kits, for example. They'll have 8 channels mic'd up, and you don't want to have to decrease all 8 channels at the same time, because you'll mess up the mix that you've set for them. Just link them all into your subgroups, and they'll go straight in. And all you need to do, make sure you move 1 and 2 up at the same time. Otherwise, you only get half the kit. And it'll keep the original panning as well. So if you've panned the vocals as well, when it sends the mix to the mains, it'll keep the panning. So that's another way of using these subgroups, is to group things in, all the instruments, all the vocals. Now obviously you're limited here because you've only got one set of subgroups. But if you had more, then you can do, so if you had subgroups 3 and 4, you can have maybe the vocals on 1 and 2, and you can have the musicians on 3 and 4. And if you wanted to have a situation where the musicians could never get louder than the vocals, you would just turn subgroups 3 and 4 lower than subgroups 1 and 2, and you will have a situation where the musicians would always be lower in volume than the singers. Okay? And again, it keeps all the panning settings you have on the individual channels. The final way in which you can utilize the subgroups, and I'm going to switch to the other microphone for this. Right, there we go. So the final way in which you can utilize the subgroups, so I'm going to need 2 hands for this. The final way in which you can do this is this. Say, for example, I wanted to be able to control all the singers on channel 1, subgroup 1, and all the musicians on subgroup 2, because I don't have 3 and 4, and I'm at an event where it's important that I control subgroups 1 and 2, all the singers on one and all the musicians on the other, and I've got no choice. Well, they've inbuilt inbuilt something that would allow me to do so, but it would have to be a sacrifice. Now, what I would still do is I'd still depress left and right here because I want whatever comes in from this side to go into subgroup 1 and 2, but I want the subgroup 1 and 2 to send the signal, left and right signal, to send it to the left and right, which is the main left and right here. Otherwise, I won't get any sound going into my mains. But what I can do is, if I came over here and I panned, if I came over here and what I did is I removed the main, depressed the subgroup, okay? So now this channel 1 is only going into the subgroup 1 and 2. Then I panned this all the way to the left, okay? What would then happen is, if I turned subgroup 1 up, I would get channel 1, but with the mix in the center, so it won't be panned to the left. It'll be channel 1 coming out of subgroup 1, but despite the fact that I have this moved all the way to the left, the sound that I'll hear from the speakers will come out mid, as if that was like that. Now I won't be able to, you won't be able to, actually you will be able to hear it. So I'm going to unmute that. I'm going to show you what I mean. So if you look at the main speaker there, let me just, if you look at the main speaker there, the main left and right there, you will see that channel 1 is panned all the way to the left, okay? All the way to the left. Main volume is up, but I've taken the main out, and obviously the solo is not on. Sorry, the solo is not on. Only subgroup is depressed, subgroup 1 and 2. But because I've panned that all the way to the left, and I've lifted that, and I've told it to send it to the left and right mix, you can hear me through, and just to prove it to you, I've muted channel 8 where the clip-on mic is. So this is the clip-on mic. So I've muted that clip-on mic, but you can hear me out of left and right, and you can also clearly see that above the main volume, left and right is coming out. So the sacrifice in this is this. Whilst you can, when you utilize this, and say I did it for channel 2, it's a singer, channel 3 is a singer, channel 4 is a singer, and I moved all of this all the way to the left. Okay, so those are all panned to the left. It would then mean, as you can see, all the subgroup 1 subs are depressed, the button subs. That's subgroup 1 and 2. They just didn't have enough space to put 1 and 2, but it says sub, but it's subgroup 1 and 2. Everybody who's on channel 1, 2, 3, and 4 will come out sounding out of the left and right on the main channel, even though only subgroup 1 is turned up. Okay? Now, incidentally, from channel 5, 6, 7, and 8, as you can see, I've panned all of those to the right. You will notice that if I put up subgroup 2, anything on there will automatically come out sounding like it's in the center, and it'll all go out of the main mix. Okay? Now, I'll prove it to you. I'm going to bring the volume down for a subgroup. So yeah, um, you'll be able to hear subgroup. You'll be able to hear that mic left and right coming out of the speaker. Let me just try that one more time. Two, two. There we go. So the speaker's panned all the way to the right. The channel's panned all the way to the right. Channel 8, where the clip-on mic is still muted. Um, down so there's no confusion. Channel 1 is there, pumping, and as you can see that subgroup 2 is up, left and right depressed, and you can hear what's coming out because that's how you can utilize subgroup. Now, the thing that you end up giving away, and I'm going to switch mics for this. Right. The thing that you end up invariably giving away is the fact that because you've panned that all the way to the right, or you've panned it all the way to the left, what you end up giving away is your ability to pan any mix that you send. So whilst you can send all the singers or whatever you have grouped, pan to the left to subgroup 1, and you can send the musicians if that's what you want. Everything you have grouped to the right, pan to the right, sorry, to subgroup 2, which could be musicians, and you want to be able to put the musicians down here, keep the singers up there, and then send that mix to left and right. Everything will now be sent centered. So it won't honor, well, there won't be any panning there because it'll just send everything dead center. So if you've got too many things there, then you're in trouble. So that's something that you need to think about when you're trying to utilize this particular method of splitting just the two subgroups you have when you're limited like this. And that's the giveaway that you have there. So there's sort of some things to think about if you want to utilize your subgroup channels for that, if you want to sort of use them for that last method I've shown you. And if you need to rewind and go back and sort of look at what we talked about, by all means please do. Sorry for the technical issues we're having there. I just pulled this desk out of storage today. I've had this desk since 2012. It's been brilliant. As far as I know, I've never had any problems with it not working. So yeah, if you didn't get any sound when I did the pan to the right, it could just be some dust in the channels. It's been sat in storage for quite some time, nearly a year actually. No, 6 months. Sorry, but it was being used prior to that. But yeah, so this is something that you need to think about if that's what you're looking to do. But all in all, these are the sort of features you have for your subgroups. And this is how you can utilize your panning channels and your subgroup channels going forward if you ever wanted to utilize them in that particular way. Yeah, but if you have any further questions or anything, if this has been helpful, give us a like. By all means, send this video to as many people as possible. If you subscribe to the channel, as I release more videos, you will have more content that you can share. If you hit the notification bell, anytime I release a new video, you'll get that video, which means there'll be more content for you to utilize. It will also mean that if you have any questions and you've asked me to do a video on something, if you hit the notifications bell, it then means that when I do post the video, you'll know straight away, and you're not sat there for weeks and months on end thinking, why hasn't he answered my questions? You'll have the answer that you were looking for, and you'll be notified straight away as soon as I've posted the video. But yeah, it's been another video. Thank you very much for your time, and I will catch you guys in the next video.